We've become so good at filling the silence, we have forgotten about the value of silence. We reach for our phones the second we start to feel just a tiny bit bored. We mistake stillness for emptiness. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of access to some of the most important thinking we will ever do. Welcome to your daily hit of grace and grit, your quick dose of inspiration to kickstart your day. I'm Courtney Townley, and here is today's hit. Answer this honestly. When was the last time you were genuinely bored? Not just unoccupied for 30 seconds before you reached for your phone, but uncomfortably, fidgetingly bored, like uncomfortably so. When was the last time? For most of us, the honest answer is, it's been a minute. It's probably been years. And that matters more than we realize, because boredom is not a malfunction. It's a neurological state with a specific and valuable purpose. And we've engineered boredom almost completely out of our lives. So today, I want to make a case for bringing it back. And I will say from the outset of this episode today that one of my favorite books I think I've read on this topic was Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. It's such a brilliant read, and he speaks a lot about the power of boredom. But recently, I just took, for spring break, my family and I went off-grid and camped for a week. And I love that about camping because it just forces us to detach from all technology. And once you detach from technology, like you don't even have the opportunity to access it, you realize how much noise it creates in your life. So I immediately feel my nervous system decompress when I don't have access to technology. I read more. I observe nature more. In all ways, I just feel more grounded. And I saw the same thing happen with my husband and my son. You know, teenagers are so funny because they always have their phones with them. And definitely at the beginning of our trip, there were moments where my son was like visibly agitated, right? Like he was looking for something to do. But as the days went on, he got more and more comfortable, more and more creative, spending more time just doing silly things in nature, learning skills. It was just awesome. And such a great reminder about like creating boredom on purpose. There's a great quote by, I don't know if I'm going to say his name right, Blaise Pascal. Blaise. It's got to be Blaise. Blaise. Is that Blaise? Anyway, you can correct me somewhere where you can get a hold of me, but we're going to say Blaise Pascal, right? And he wrote this in the 1600s. Okay, long before smartphones and streaming and 24-hour news was available to us, which tells you the impulse to flee stillness is not a modern invention, because the quote is this: all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That is a pretty powerful statement, right? Here is what neuroscience tells us happens when the brain is given unstructured, unstimulated time. When the brain is bored, in other words, it activates what's called the default mode network, which is a set of brain regions that become most active when we are not focused on an external task. And this network is where the brain consolidates memories, processes emotions, generates creative insight, and constructs our sense of self and narrative. So just hearing that, you can glean the importance of being bored, right? In other words, the brain's most important inner work happens in the gaps, not during the input, but during the space in between the inputs. When we fill every gap with stimulation, we always listen to podcasts, we're always scrolling, we always have noise in the background. We are essentially never giving the default mode network a chance to run. And what a tragedy, because there's a lot of goodness there. So we're perpetually in reactivity mode. We're never in integrative mode. And the consequence is a kind of inner static, a vague restlessness, difficulty accessing our own feelings, creative depletion, and a sense of disconnection from our own inner life. I feel like I coach on this every single day, honestly. There's this internal agitation that we have a really hard time naming. And when we poke holes in why that agitation exists, it's no surprise that the same people experiencing that agitation are also the ones who cannot sit in a room alone with nothing to do. And I will also say that for midlife women especially, right, there's a lot of rewiring happening in the brain at midlife. But we're in a season in midlife of significant identity reconfiguration, right? And this internal space and this internal processing that happens when we're bored is not a luxury. It's where we get to answer some of the most important questions that we'll answer at midlife. Like, who am I becoming? Who do I want to spend the next half of my life being? What do I actually want? What do I enjoy? What brings me pleasure? What needs to change? What do I need to let go of? And you cannot hear those answers when you're always receiving input and when there's a lot of noise. I shared with my community several times this past month about one of my really big practices this year is extending the pause. And it's showing up in a lot of ways for me. When I'm dealing with conflict or something that feels urgent, but also really big, when I see an email that maybe brings a little agitation, I don't respond right away. I give myself at least a couple hours. If I can, I try to give myself a whole evening so I don't even circle back until the next day. And what it is showing me is so potent. It's showing me that I like who I am being so much more when I have given myself the grace of the pause. Because I can ground myself, I can give the challenge, whatever it is, some consideration, some thoughtfulness. I can make sure I'm coming back to a resolution with energy that keeps me in integrity with who I want to be in the world. And oh my gosh, it is not easy because I have been reacting my whole life in terms of like everything feels urgent, right? Like I must respond to this email as soon as I open it. I must resolve the conflict as soon as it arrives. That's always been my way. And what I'm seeing so clearly is that's not just hurting me, it's hurting the other people involved because I'm not coming at it with my best thinking. And I'm not coming at it with a problem-solving attitude. In fact, in many ways, I think I'm creating more problems when I am reactive about it. So extending the pause is and I mention that here because to me, it's almost like a intentional boredom, right? Where I'm sitting with it. And yes, I'm thinking about it a little bit. There's definitely that, but there's also a not thinking about it that just helps me to land myself and center myself. So I want you, if you don't already do this, to engineer intentional boredom into your day. And I know that is such an unsexy invitation, but I hope it's a little sexier after this episode today, right? No phone, no podcast, no task, just you, your surroundings, and whatever thoughts or feelings show up. It'll be wildly uncomfortable at first. It might be wildly uncomfortable for a long time. But that discomfort is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that something real is about to surface. It's a sign that you have abandoned a practice of stillness that your body and brain desperately need. So challenge yourself to sit with it, see what comes. The most important conversations you will ever have with yourself are the ones that happen in the stillness. And you cannot have them if you're always in motion, if you're never still, and if you're always talking and never stopping to listen. So create intentional boredom and see where that takes you. That's the invitation. If this stirred something inside of you, imagine what a whole book of clarity and courage could ignite. The Consistency Code, a midlife woman's guide to deep health and happiness, goes even deeper into the mindset and practices that create real, meaningful change at midlife. Grab your copy today over at theconsistencycode.com and keep the momentum alive.